majority of African Americans that lived here were brought over here.
No.
No.
No, that's not economically sound.
What do you mean by it's not economically sound?
So what I'm saying is people were already here. Does it make sense to go all the way to this other continent to bring people on a boat when we know that half of your stock is going to die? You wouldn't do that.
So how many people do you think were brought over from Africa on slave ships? Because that definitely happened.
I don't believe it.
What do you mean you don't believe it?
I don't believe that story. You think this whole land was empty? No, there were natives here.
Right.
But today we're taught that natives is some other people. No, natives are the melanated African being that has come here since the beginning of the Mali Empire. We're talking about 14th, 13th century. We had already come here from Africa.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had already come here. You know, maybe people were brought over as slaves, but I don't think that the black people in America came from Africa on slave ships. I believe the people that were here were slowly conquered. First, they got the East Coast, and then they started spreading out west little by little, conquering. And when you conquer a tribe, what do? You enslave them. They're POWs. Right?
Okay.
That's what you do.
But I'm still confused. There's a great history of slave ships being brought over from Africa.
History is his story.
Right.
What about my story? Is my story not valid?
But if you do 23andMe on from out,
23andMe?
Well, that's
either way. If you take black people here in America and you do their DNA sample and it point back to Africa, what does that say? It says black people in America are Africans. Now the argument is, were we brought here or were we already here? Did we bring ourselves here or did the white man bring us here? You see, when you say the white man brought us here, what you're doing is you're removing our ability to transport ourselves. You're saying, oh, we didn't know anything about boats. That's what you're trying to tell me. You're trying to tell me that we didn't know that there was a landmass here. Go look at the primary source. You got here, we met black people. When you got the Caribbean, we met black people. You think the Caribbean is right next to America and they weren't in America?
That's interesting.
Doesn't make any sense. I mean, when you go and you look at real European history, right, would believe that if they took a bath, it was bad.
Right.
They didn't even want to change their clothes. They thought that dirty was purity. When we talk about the Moors going into Spain and into Europe, the stories in the history, our history, says that when we met the so-called Caucasian, he was sleeping in the barn with the animals, and we told him, no, you can't sleep in the barn with animals. We taught them etiquette. We taught them running water. We brought that technology to Europe. Now, if we brought the technology to Europe that saved Europe from the Black Plague, you mean to tell me that if we saved the white race, that we weren't already in America already? When we brought the technology, when Rome was dependent on Africa for food? Remember when the Black Plague hit Rome? The cause was one of the officials was stealing the grain that was coming from Africa. So there was famine, hit Rome. If your source of sustenance is from Africa, how are you superior? You're not. You get your food from me. So if you get your food from me, who's more likely to travel this globe? Me, I'm the source of food. And that's the first thing you need to survive on it.
You guys listen to this bullshit.
On this 29th of February, Jeff Glor of CBS This Morning Saturday has a story for us. And we must say it's about time.
Watch this all the way through. Jesus. Watch it all the way through.
Since the beginning, humankind has been obsessed with tracking time. And nearly every civilization has tried to squeeze that time into an accurate calendar. But for thousands of years, we were missing one crucial element. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping. The leap year.
I think that time is very confusing sometimes when you have to think about it.
Jackie Faherty is an astrophysicist at the American Museum of Natural History's Hayden Planetarium in New York City. When people think about the day, February 29th, what should they think about?
we're placing a human construct around what is an astronomical phenomenon of the Earth moving around the sun.
The calendar we use includes leap years because of how long it really takes the Earth to orbit the sun, which is not 365 days. It's about
Wait till the end. I know you
365
know all
and a
this.
quarter. The
Wait till the
Julian
end.
calendar in 46 BC was the first to add a leap day every 4 years, but it still wasn't quite right. That led to the Gregorian calendar, which set the leap year pattern we've used since the 16th century. But some think it's high time for another big change.
You guys have been working on this calendar for how long?
Decades.
And so far,
Nada.
Enter Dick Henry and Steve Hankey, professors at Johns Hopkins University, and the biggest current backers of a brand new calendar, one that eliminates leap years and also standardizes the days and weeks to always be the same each year.
January 1 is always on a Monday, forever.
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 In addition to starting every year on a Monday, the Hankey-Henry permanent calendar would also set your birthday and the holidays to the same day of the week every year, except October 31st, which along with all Friday the 13th would vanish. In place of leap years, every 5 or 6 years, an extra week is inserted at the end of December. Sort of an extended Christmas vacation.
there's no
Wait.
such thing as a perfect calendar. You just
There's
think this
more.
is better than what we have now.
Ours is very close to perfect.
We have current calendar. Every year, the thing jerks around by a day or two.
But
This
aren't
is the important part.
quirks and eccentricities part of the human existence?
We could make things worse and then you'd be happier.
Calendar changes, people I think are resistant to because of what it means from the infrastructure of how we all live our lives. The Earth doesn't really care what day you call it. It's going around the sun, doing the thing.
Christianity. And the first people they started to persecute were the Gnostics, because the Gnostics, and this is an idea that many who are committed to Christianity will find repulsive or very difficult to accept. The Gnostics said that the entity that we call God, Jehovah, as he is in the Old Testament, the Muslims call him Allah, it's the same entity, the God of Abraham, that this entity, the God of Judaism as well, of course, Jehovah, God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, goes by different names, he's the same entity, but this entity isn't a God at all from the Gnostic point of view. From the Gnostic point of view, the simple word to describe him is a demon. He's a demon. And what he's done is he has convinced mankind that he is God. And he wants us to, because he's really a demon, not a God at all, he wants to bring out the worst in us. He wants us to behave in ways that cause fear and terror and hatred and division, because that's what he thrives on. That's what he grows on. He grows on that, the manipulation of hatred in humanity. And if you look at the statements and the actions of the God of the Old Testament, he is not a nice guy. The stuff he does, the mass murders that he's responsible for, the incitement that he delivers to his followers to engage in horrific acts occurs again and again. And you have to ask yourself, can this be a good thing? Can this be a good thing when he's telling us to go off and commit acts of murder in his name? And those acts of what I often say is, when you look at the three mainstream monotheistic faiths, all of them talk the talk of peace and love. But actually, if you look at the walk they walk, it's a walk of hatred and fear and suspicion. And it seems to me that there's a real chance that the Gnostics were right, and that the entity that we have been hoodwinked by, a supernatural entity, if you like, by a demonic entity who has persuaded us that he is God, made us act in his names, the crusades, the religious wars, the terrible divisions, the persecutions of members of other faiths that have occurred, all of that is not the action of a good and loving God. All of that is the action of a demon, and that's what the Gnostics said he was. They called him the demiurge, and they felt that he had representatives in the human race who disguised themselves as human beings, who were called archons, whose whole sole task was to mislead us further down the path of darkness and take us away so that we would never realize the divine spark within ourselves, and that a grand cosmic game is being played out here, at which the human race is the fulcrum, and the decisions that we make and the choices that we make are not only important to us, but are important to the whole cosmos. This is the center of the Gnostic idea. It's a very powerful idea, and I think it's an idea that
Let me tell you the problem, and people don't seem to understand this part of it. Money is not easy to come by. You ask people for donations and so on. They give you some. I don't want to tell you who was Oswest's largest donor. I don't want to tell you who gave him the most money. But I'll tell you this. Much of the money that the Labour had spent in this election was money that they stole from the people themselves. They stole that money and they stored a part of it to use in buying votes. It is not through the generosity of others that they were able to get the whole set of money that they had. This was as a result of them stealing $14 billion from the public purse. 14 billion, that's $4.6 million from every single Jamaican, including the baby, including the beggar who was to pay GCT. And then they took it and they bought my black brothers and sisters. This is a return to slavery. That's what it is. But this time is not the white man buying the black man. It's the black man putting up himself for sale to anybody, whether black or white. My brother, we are going to regret this. I will be gone. I will be gone. But black people going to regret it, because the time is coming when not one single person coming out of Northeast St. Catherine will be able to become a member of Parliament. Not one. Only the rich, the very rich, will be able to become members of Parliament, to plunder the public purse some more and steal some more and let themselves get richer. I'm told that Michael Manley time gone. My God, my God, why hast thou forsaken us?
This is a war. Whether Russia and the U.S. go to war, or whether, as Vanden Heuvel says, the U.S. will take on China, this is a war between slave masters, okay? This is nothing but modern-day slavery. And when the slave masters fight, you don't side with one or another master. You don't side with my master. You take advantage of the fact that they're fighting to overthrow the whole institution of slavery, to get free. And this is how we have to look at it when these imperialists fight. We're not rooting for our imperialists. We are welcoming the defeat of these modern-day slave masters in whatever they undertake, okay? Because that is one step, or could be, if we do our work right, one step closer to being...
Do you want to know why the West want to defeat Russia in Ukraine? I'm going to tell you a secret. Shh. The West want you to be afraid of them. That's how they keep power. But it's a bluff. The West has lost its imperial might long ago. NATO is not as strong as you think. NATO is not as united as you think. And Russia called the bluff. And other nations will call the bluff. And the world will change.
In 5 years, China has been there for us. The USA has not been there for us. When Southern Africa was on fire fighting the apartheid regime, the USA sided with the apartheid regime of South Africa. They did not side with the African people. They never supported the ANC. They labeled Mandela a terrorist, but today they exalt Mandela in all sorts of ways. SWAPO was a terrorist organization in Namibia. ZANLA and ZIPRA in Zimbabwe were terrorist organizations. They were not on our side. They were on the side of the oppressors of this continent. They participated in the killing of our leaders. The USA participated in the killing of Patrice Lumumba. The USA participated in the toppling of Kwame Nkrumah. The USA participated in the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi. The USA participated in so many coups on the African continent. China has never participated in any coup. China has never killed a single African. How many Africans had the USA killed?
They attack black people after they've been murdered. When they did absolutely nothing wrong, you're pushing us to the limit. And what do I mean by that? You're asking us to talk about history, the history of the South. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? There were savages in Georgia. It was the ancestors of the white right-wingers. They were absolute savages. They murdered people. They lynched people. They raped people. They enslaved people. They took babies from their mothers and sold them as property. You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. So don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murdered him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them, to them, not by them.